administration, and so it was implemented right at the beginning of the Reagan administration. And in 1992, Clinton campaigned on lifting that ban, and because of all the fierce opposition among the religious right and military leaders and certain conservatives in Congress, including Democrats under whom this policy was actually implemented, Senator Sam Nunn in particular, threatened to write the ban into law for the first time. So before that, it had just been a Pentagon policy. And so there were months and months and months of debate and delay, which is why there's some concern about the delay this time that's being discussed.
And talk just for a minute a little more about that delay that's being discussed now.
I think President Clinton and some of the gay advocates who were working with him to lift the ban underestimated the nature and the fierceness of the opposition, culturally, politically, and militarily. And Clinton, not knowing quite what to do, called for a 6-month study period, which sounds eerily familiar to today, even though the times have changed and the military's with Mullen and Gates' position is much more supportive of reform, which is good news. So President Clinton in January, the week after he was inaugurated, called for a 6-month study period, commissioned the famous RAND study, which recommended repeal. Also commissioned a military working group, which was the military generals and admirals, just 6 of them, to give their opinion. You heard McCain say something about the military feels this is working. It's not about what they're feeling. This is about research and objective reason. And the military itself has been looking at this since 1957. Their own studies show that it works, and each time they read these studies, they try to bury them. So there's enormous research. President Clinton said, let's look at the research, let's commission more studies. They didn't read the studies last time, they're not going to read them this time. During that period, the problem was it opened up a window for obstructionists to stir up resistance, to sow fear and doubt and anxiety, which is, a conservative tactic that has worked well for them. And then the compromise was made with Congress and Clinton to do this don't ask, don't tell. So we certainly come further than that, and I'm hopeful. But there are alarm bells going off about a replay with the idea of, they're updating the RAND study. Well, the RAND study already said very clearly that this can work and how to do it, which is to do it quickly and cleanly. So I'm not sure what the update's going to say.
Nathaniel, how do other countries do it?
There's 25 countries that let gays serve openly, and they did it quickly and cleanly. In Britain, Canada in particular, there were court orders, and in a matter of months, the policy was overturned. And studies by our own research center, the Palm Center, as well as those militaries themselves, the Ministry of Defense, hailed this as a solid achievement. Everywhere, it's been a no-impact policy change.
How did Britain do it?
Well, there's two.
When?
It was a 1999 court decision, and then at the end of '99, in the beginning of 2000, it was done. Obviously, there were, there were guidelines. There were some months of implementation transition. But how they did it was looking at the research that shows 2 important things. One, consistent signals by leadership that they're behind this, and we're beginning to get that from our own military. And 2, a very simple, uniform code of behavior for everyone. And if you follow those 2 principles, you will find, and if you do this quickly and cleanly, rather than having a series of new policy initiatives every 6 months, which causes confusion and concern, then it will work.
Do you think it's possible that, as with President Clinton, this will actually not happen?
Well, I think the big question is what will happen in Congress. I think what the Pentagon is doing, and I applaud them for it, is to look at what latitude they have within the law, because remember, there's a law and a policy. They're very similar, but they have slight differences. Within the law, the Pentagon has a lot of latitude to apply this differently and to minimize discharges, and that's what they look like they're doing. In Congress, it's unclear when they will get with the program, but I think as the Pentagon modifies enforcement, it will be harder and harder for people like McCain to holler that openly gay service is impossible, because it'll be right in front of them.
It's interesting, the concern about gay men and lesbians being in units with other men and women, that the suggestion is they would prey on them, when there's a tremendous problem of sexual harassment and assault in the military, but it's overwhelmingly heterosexual. Alexander Nicholson, how do you deal with this? How do you talk about this?
I think one of the good things that Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal will do within the military that I think, perhaps it's not really considered yet, but I think will have positive effects in other ways, is that it will sort of gender neutralize the sexual harassment issues within the military. You know, because right now, I mean, equal opportunity training within the military tends to really focus on male on female sexual harassment, and obviously we know that that's, you know, the majority of the cases, but it also tends to foster a lot of discontent within the military, especially, you know, among the males in the military who see themselves as always being portrayed as the villains. And, you know, I think when you take the gender issue out of the sexual harassment training and the equal opportunity training within the military, you're just going to have an emphasis on, you know, it being improper for one person to sexually harass another in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's going to have effects in other ways as well. It's going to take some of the tension and some of the discontent out of the equal opportunity training and policies and programs within the military.
It might surprise a number of people, Alexander Nicholson, to know that under President Clinton, for example, beginning with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was supposed to be a softer policy, more gay men and lesbians were thrown out of the military. You represent an organization of gay men and lesbians, troops, veterans, allies, who have been thrown out. Can you tell us some of their stories now and what will happen now?
Well, sure. You know, I mean, as you mentioned, and as Nathaniel can tell you very well, there was definitely a spike in not only discharges, but just overall attention around the issue within the military in the early 90s when this issue came up. And you know, it definitely has an effect when the issue comes up in the media and it's talked about within the ranks, it's talked about on the job. You know, it tends to have sort of a heightened, give people a heightened awareness of the issue of gays in the military and of, you know, the people who are gay and lesbian among them. But in terms of the stories and experiences of those who, you know, not only are members of Service Members United, but, you know, who we work with other organizations as well, you know, I mean, people, the experiences range the entire spectrum. You know, we have people who, you know, work with us, like Jared Chapowski, who's with the Human Rights Campaign now, who served completely openly for 5 years and never had a problem, was open to all of his peers, his command, and no one ever moved to discharge him, to people like a Coast Guard, a member of the Coast Guard, who was, you know, severely beaten up, harassed by his roommates when they found out he was gay. And, you know, I think part of the problem with that is that the policy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the law really sends the message that the military as an institution condones that type of behavior, that there's something bad about being gay, that it needs to be hidden, and if it comes out, that then becomes fair game for a lot of that behavior. But, you know, experiences really range the entire spectrum, and you could find, you know, from the absolute best cases to the absolute worst cases, which sort of goes back to the point that, you know, Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been a complete failure in the way Nathaniel was talking about.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. We will certainly continue to follow this policy and the whole debate. Alexander Nicholson, former U.S. Army Human Intelligence Collector, founder and executive director of Service Members United, which is an organization of a national group of gay and lesbian troops and veterans, and Nathaniel Frank, author of Unfriendly Fire, How the Gay Ban Undermines the Military and Weakens America. He is a research fellow at the University of California, Santa Barbara's Palm Center. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Stay with us.